So just take care. Keep up.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.tv.
Shocking crickets. That's what it's going to become. You're going to be shocked. I mean, for realies, if you don't pay attention, this is what's coming on to us. In lots of ways. If you don't believe me, the signs are in nature. It's getting a little bit more tumultuous out in the real world. Keep telling you about Mother Nature wanting to, if she ever had a consciousness to shake us off, it wouldn't be much. And there's not going to be much that we can do to stop all this. This week it was kind of interesting that I watch Suspicious Observers YouTube. Ben does a daily solar weather video. And he made a comment on a Twitter that a couple days ago, that there was a solar triggered earthquake patterns that hint to a capacitor model. And what I appreciate about Ben is he's picked up a lot of what my thoughts were a long time ago, and he's actually putting into practice in contact now in the world of internet. He can contact scientists and university academics and all kinds of interesting sources of information to work with them, and coming up with interesting ideas, which were kind of lunacy, if you will, for the sun, lunacy of thoughts. But back when I was looking at all this, without the internet. In other words, when I'm looking at earthquakes, I found my own little patterns, it seemed, which I've told you before. The pattern that I found that worked for 30 years, it was a reflexive type of patterning that happened triggered by certain earthquakes. It ended at the Banda Aceh earthquake. There hasn't been another. That response in the world stopped, and so I think it actually been reduced. You have to look at the lesser earthquakes, and there's so many there that you can't worry about happenstance and change. But he brings up this idea of capacitor modeling in the atmosphere and the world. And those of you that understood or have researched Tesla, you'll see this is similar. So he's come on to that as well. Well, he made this comment about a capacitor model, and with regard to shocking experiences, it wasn't even, I don't think, in the next day. Bangladesh, 42 are killed. Lightning strikes. So there's a response and dynamic, if you pay attention, that could be answering a lot of natural consequences about us. That if we're not paying attention, as we start seeing, like this spring is becoming pretty cool, fairly cool spring. I think those of you in the middle United States are feeling this. This big sweeps are coming in as the climate changes. The dynamic of the climate is altering a bit, and there's lots of potential reasons, but it's not outside of what anything is not normal. This is just the fluctuations and variations. But I wanted to talk to you about this shocking experience. 42 people, including women and children, were killed in Bangladesh within the last 24 hours after being struck by lightning during thunder showers. This occurring right after Ben Davidson makes the comment that if you consider the world as in a capacitor model, that there's some reflection going on and expectations that you can have. Well, if that's a capacitor model, we just saw the discharge in a very low pressure system over India. And so I'm suggesting to you, those of you that are, as we go into these interesting times in actual weather, not the fraud, be cautious. Don't challenge, because I'm one of those guys. I kind of like nature. It just excites me to see storms coming in and this and that. I want to go out and about around it and see what it's about. But be careful on being aware. My suspicion is, and we were told back quite a few decades ago, weather will be coming in that's going to be reaching, let's say, really severe weather that could be reaching the tops of the Rockies but lightning goes all the way to the ground wherever you is, and you don't want to be standing there when you figured out that the Earth has taken a charge from the sun. This is why understanding the sun, and as Ben Davidson reports it, the space weather may be very important to you. 42 people die within 24 hours, and it just so happens to be coincident with a charging example in the environment based on the sun. So if you don't think that the sun and the earth dynamic is something, maybe you should start paying attention to that, because if we don't, we aren't going to understand that maybe that has more reality and more odds of happening to us than maybe any EMP that whether the United States drops on the head of its own people to prove a point, or some other country deciding to preempt what the United States might be doing as it keeps going through the world, being the bully and brute, and adversely affecting people in different countries to do whatever it is it thinks it's going to do. These people, these psychopaths, I'm just not of the mentality to understand it. But one action that we have to, regardless of how hard it is to understand how we're going to stop it, that it has to be stopped. I don't know how anybody can look in the world and justify complacency in themselves. And I've just come to the simple occurrence in my mind, and looking through history again, it's really hard to avoid, or even if you want to deny and evade, the proof that's historic that if you have an occupying people, occupying influence, and occupying force on your land, you got to throw it off, or it will take you out. It'll change you, and you'll be lucky if it changes you a little bit, but moves in the same direction. But this bully and brute in the world called the United States of America, and until I get the red phone call that explains this to me a lot clearer, I see no justification for it. But this country, it's not even the U.S., it's the U.S. It's not the United States of America. That's really the landmass and the contiguous parts of all the states and the other the European Union that isn't in the USA that it sits there for us to agree to or not. The United States manages that big old territory of the states, and the people are silent, crickets. But the United States and Washington, D.C. is the active part looking outward, as the Constitution shows you. It's supposed to look outward and look after the international affairs of this nation. And international also meant among the states that were abroad each other. So we see admiralty pretty clearly there. That this country, the United States government, the seat of power, the wielding of the sword, goes out and destroys nations for whatever reason, is something that should concern you. I've told you, if you look out in the world, for those of us that are in the United States of America, look out in the world and see what's happening to you through the carnival mirror reflection of what's happening at other people. And we see if you want to understand what we do, how we go about doing it, not how we do it, but the ramifications of what these elements are. We'll go down to Venezuela really quick, and scenes from Venezuela apocalypse. Countless wounded after 5,000 loot supermarket looking for food. Should start ringing bells here, as we've been calling this out over and over. Look to your examples of what's going to happen when the wheels start to come off, whether by natural dynamic or fabricated dynamic. In particular, let's say the CIA going into Venezuela and causing these things to happen. You look to see how people respond. It's not a pretty picture. I guess that's been my whole point. Laws are really only there because it's not a pretty picture. We don't seem to strive. Now, generally we are, but we don't seem, in another general sense, to strive for the better way. We tend to have a few among us that keep getting away. We're wanting to get away with your stuff, and that people don't like that. I mean, there may be a charity and altruism, but at some point it stops when it starts to, the parasite feeds from the host until it dies. At that point, you got self-defense. But let's look to Venezuela to see what people start to do. These are not evil people. These are hungry people. These are wanting to eat, and that's all. That's all we're talking about. In this world, where I was just talking last week about production, and we can outproduce anything if we put our mind to it, that there's hungry people in the world is really really telltale of the shame of people and of those that would create conditions that would deny people these basic elements that we need. And before I go too far, I almost forget. The show broadcast code will be BTWRLM 162. For those of you doing the past cast, looking for the blogcaster, it's 162. And so we'll get back to this. Look to see that Venezuela is telling you how people will respond. These are people that are probably good people. There's no notice to me that any of them are evil. 5,000 got together just to go find some food. That's what's going to be happening. And this is what the problem is, like all the preppers. If you keep up saying how well you're prepping, they're going to consider you the grocery store. And so this is not fiction. This is not fairy tale. People will do what they need to do. And when they get put into these urban centers, there's no production. They have to get their food from the store, and they get emptied out quickly. And the reason why that one happened was because a rumor got sent out that this store had lots of things that other stores didn't, the staples. And so everyone showed up from all over over the large area to show up at their doorstep to come and get it. Apparently millions of dollars of damage was made, but this is, again, this is how people respond. And this is how easy they are to control. And if you think by yourself you're going to stop this mob when it's hungry and looking for food, but don't be surprised when they consider you food. As the hungry Venezuelans hunt for dogs, cats, pigeons as the food runs out. I'm not trying to fearmonger here. There's a reality in the world. Everyone wants to say, well, it's this way, it's that way, we can function this way. Well, you can't. When somebody comes in to take you out, or you make decisions that allow someone to take away your necessities, you are prey. You're prey to whatever they want to do, and you're going to be seeking, as a predator, other prey. Dogs, cats, pigeons are being hunted down as food runs out. As I've said a long time ago, we might have some deer running around, but those are going to be disappearing pretty quickly once some constraints come down. And they come down in all kinds of ways. But this is an artificial type of condition that's been placed on the people. I'm sure the government of the United States is inside this, no different than they're inside Brazil. For as much as that president, or whoever she was, had to get out, the new one they put in is a CIA operative. You knew that was coming. Just watch the facts of it. Your life can be changed just by these decisions. And it takes beyond prepping, beyond being prepared to be able to protect against this. It really is going to be a dynamic that we are unaware of. Talk about shocking. Going after your pet because you got nothing. And it got worse. It seems somebody tried to mug someone else, and the mob jumped on that, in possibly to the vigilante mob, if you will, protecting themselves from these predators. Beat somebody down and lit him on fire. Instant justice. 70% of his body's burnt. He's in the hospital. Well, he survives, and there is a hospital, so it's not quite that bad. But this is what starts to happen. And I don't know that there's anything that people in America have seen that will prepare them for all these kinds of things. If we're not so exceptional that it's allowed to come onto us, this global, I don't even know what to call it. It's not like socialism. It's not communism. It's we can put all these names on it. It's a new thing. It's a new thing going to go on, and I just call it the stinking abyss. You've heard me talk about this the whole time. I've been on broadcast. It's been coming, and it's coming because we're not stepping up to stop it. Oh, well, there's a few of us that'll research ourselves to the brink of the stinking abyss, and that's kind of an interesting duality. We're actually in it, slipping in, but we're actually standing also on the edge because it's not completely consumed us. And very few people will do the hard, honest work to do that, and then do something beyond that, besides just standing looking in. That we are seeing this whole thing play out. Now, that said, what's passing is news, the notice. They want to have you know. I tell you, the news is notice of what they want you to know. There's also now the internet, with the way the internet is, There is people that are independent voices, apparently, hopefully, that will tell us another story. And so we have to start balancing what we see, what we hear, what we're told, with these other inputs. And it is being said, and I have a link, you'll have to get this at the blogcast. There's no way I can convey this to you more than just to explain a quick little video that was presented by Telesur in English as Chaos and Repression. Venezuela, Chaos and Repression is a question. They're saying that these, again, as I've been saying to you, that the news is notice to what they want you to know, that we're getting more confirmation that if we can call it the mainstream, to me it's this government media, is telling you what it wants you to tell you, and maybe not accurately. And they fabricate the information, the data you use to make decisions. And so we got to be careful on not getting too overly entertained, and it takes a real keen eye to start seeing what is and what isn't, how it's going to work. And I just want you to see how people respond. Until we get that out of us, we're going to have a little bit of trouble. Now, once we get it, see, I've been sitting back wondering, why isn't Venezuela stepping up? Now, what this report will tell you about the chaos of repression being a fraud, they're saying that the people are rallying up, but they're over labor and jobs. Now, that doesn't even sound, that might be the truth, but somehow that doesn't fit with the collapse that they're telling us is coming in Venezuela. So there's a dynamic that goes on. I guess the point is the people are ignorant of the workings of how this thing is being driven. And so if we don't have a way to get around and talk to each other, we're going to be driven by our ignorance, and we're driven by how we respond to our necessities. And I think those are probably the only two truths I can see in all of this. It's difficult, it's tough. Whatever the motive force and actual force on it, I don't know. But people are responding. You see pictures of things. We get stories of things that people don't respond in the best way. That is why, partly why, we've come together as people. We can call ourselves the despot, the monarch. We can call ourselves the independent. We can call ourselves the sovereign. But that doesn't work. That's not the way the world works. We ended up having to tribe up so we could protect each other. And to tribe up, you got to live with people. And to do that, no man is an island. And you're going to have to deal with make some international concessions now, Mr. and Mrs. Despot. And so now we have society, if I use that word. I use all these really, I'm getting to the point, I'm using these words pretty loosely. Take them advisedly. If we had to sit down one-on-one and make a discussion, it'd be a little longer discussion than just using a word. As I say that, thank you to Solomon, who called in a Freaker's Ball. I caught just a little bit of that, his conversation. Not sure what, I just came in late and heard him make a word. And see, this is the thing about doing a live broadcast. I don't have a script. I just kind of work from my mind. And sometimes the word real time doesn't, you get focused on a concept and not a word. And so he offered, and I will accept, that I was having trouble with the word independent as an inclusive word, independent, like interdependence and independence, as he pointed out. And he offered another word called non-dependence. And I agree. That would have been a good word had it come to my mind, non-dependence. Instead of independence, we're non-dependence, we're self-reliant, and that's the failure of real time in my way. It didn't occur to me at the time. So just wanted to put that out there, that I appreciate Solomon listening closely to offer that, because these are really important things. I could have used a couple of other words. They didn't come to me either. I was on a focus on a point. So this is how you got to listen carefully, make your adjustments as you can, because you're just trying to pull out the concepts of the ideas. And I'm not saying it to talk to you, but just to have you hear me talk. I want to understand and exercise these things, and then I want you to implement these things. Because if we don't, we're not, well, again, it's so simple. If we don't respond against an intrusion against us, it prevails. It's that simple. Whatever the analogy that you throw out there about what we're in and how we're doing it and whatever names you put on it, the bottom line basics are, however you want to say, this is a war, we're in a game, we're even a game that we haven't showed up to yet, we're a society of people under whatever name. When there is a wrong against you and you don't rise up against it, you will succumb to that. And if there's a half wrong, if I can say it that way, a misinterpretation more than a wrong, no intention to do wrong, but a wrong happening nonetheless, and you don't, it expands. It's like what they call now, and you hear all these military terms, mission creep. So you can't let adultery happen. You can't adulterate whatever you believe is going on, and this is what is foisted onto you. One adultery after the next. One miscue after the next. And so it's becoming, it's not impossible, it's not really so hard. Once you see the cues, you can cut through a lot of the nonsense. And I'm only saying that, not to say, for you just to be able to do that, because I want us to get past the nonsense so we can start putting we have to have our sleeves rolled up, ready to do something and do something. And that is only of our determination to do. And so our information that we get, I've talked about this before, the data that we get, that we use, that we supposedly think we're critically thinking over, is all important to cut through. But it's known, I don't have to really go to Venezuela, we all know this, and we also know how big government forces come in to destroy you. We got that of the evidence of the Ukraine, the breadbasket down there that now was taken over, and now we're in the middle of the war because it's such a rich area and a control point. The Ukraine people, all the farmers, they came in, the government came in, I think it was the Soviet Union came in and shot all the people that knew how to grow food. And they handed all this land over to other people and then they worked them to death. That's pretty obvious. But what's happening to us now is not so obvious. Your open air prison is slavery, the slave plantation. Remember, Clinton said that. Remember that. You live in, it's the plantation and you know what I mean. She made that comment in a church, no less. So the truth is out there for us. They've just changed who the slave was, and the information that they feed you is it's another sort of food. Is how you respond. But we're bigger and better than that. They have us in that condition, and if it's us keeping the yoke on our back, the millstone around our neck, and not throwing it off. What's sad for me to see, and maybe it's just my upbringing, that not that we discussed it in such that America was such the exceptional nation, but we were the ones that did the charity and the good works and all that, and we know we're starting to learn that was all just a lie to keep us all hiding. But I believed it. I wanted to go into Peace Corps. And I noticed that it was altering as we went. That all of a sudden, then you had to have a master's, and then you had to have a special training. And I started looking at that. I go, why are they doing that? But they're looking, and then I started realizing what education the systems are. And when they start upping what you need as the paperwork, they're actually saying you have to stay in the system longer to get more classes to be inculcated with what we want you to think and the way we want you to think. So you become our agent when you go do something under the cover of being charitable, altruistic, and Peace Corps. Because you're just actually an agent of the government going to undermine that country. Like you hear, as I've told you behind the Woodshed with USAID. USAID leads all these. Now we hear it's in the white hats over in the Middle East. USAID funding white hats. Okay, there it is. It's the same model. And while this is all going on, the turmoil, the people are being destroyed. All those people are being destroyed. Their way of life, the commingling. If you can't see this as a eugenics plan as well, which I don't get into much, but if you can't see it as that, you can't see Agenda 2030 for what that's telling you there, you're not seeing it. And so, again, if you want something to be the way you want it, you're going to have to defend that position. I don't even know what analogy to put. Everyone wants to have their own analogy of what we're looking at. It can be like I said, it can be a game, it can be a war, it can be like the prison. You can put a name on a government, you can put on the lack of government, whatever you want. This is still, I don't care what you call it, it's coming against you. And if you don't stop it, it will take you out. The smarter way is the more subtle way, and they've got that figured out as well. That's what the United States problem is, I think. EU is that way as well, but not so much. They're actually getting invaded, and they don't even perceive this as well. That Brexit is still a question is interesting to me, just in the mindset of people. This is just the inclusionary future. Don't forget behind the scenes of all this, who's also speaking up and what they're calling for. Remember, this is all, the Pope is a part of this. There's one big religious movement as well. Remember the universal religion and your social mortgage. Can you believe that? These people believe that when you were born into this world, you had a social mortgage that you owed other people. And so this is how this works out. You can believe that, or you can resist it and then prevail against it. Did want to touch something else. We talked about the United States will lie and talk about whatever it wants to do just to capture your mind on what there is and what there isn't, making it even more difficult. But a story came out here with the reflection of what they're doing over there, U.S. aid and all this stuff. Then we found out the United States is bombing hospitals. A hospital in Aleppo that they said Russia just did here just 2 weeks ago or something like that. I can't remember, maybe a couple weeks ago. That they said Russia blew up had been blown up 7 months ago. And so the Russian Defense Ministry is put on task to have to prove against an accusation. If this was like two people, corporations are people too, if this was someone saying that you bombed on a hospital, that's at least a defamation suit. But see, they get away with it at the top end. But so the Russia has to step up and say, here's the satellite images of this hospital, and it was destroyed 7 months ago. How can it be destroyed by us 2 weeks ago? But in the streets and in the media, you see Putin done it. And again, I'm not a Putin apologist or even embracer. This is global play, folks. There's nothing we're going to do these are all playing the game that they're playing for their purposes. I do happen to appreciate how he's playing the game, though. So, I talk about master chessmen. I think that's what we're looking at here. Whether or not it ends up being of any fact is a matter of whether or not they can defend themselves against the next bigger bully and brute in the world. This is not about law. This is not about being peaceful. This is not about our goal is all of humanity to go toward some utopian world where everyone's enjoying the beaches and whatever you like to be and smelling the pine forest or whatever. This is not that at all. The main players are coming to put on you oppression and controls that they claim that they're not going to do. This is simply the fact. And if you keep sitting back about it, I don't know what to say. I'm talking in generalities. I'm not giving you any specifics. Maybe that's one of the problems. I don't know. But at some point, if you don't engage, there's really nothing I can tell you. It's like all the miners that might come to me or property owners. They come to me and ask me questions, and I say, well, we got to reorient your foundation first. Let's start there, and then when we get the foundation reset, then I'll have you ask me the question. Once I set the foundation, what I think is more appropriate, and that's really not what I think in opinion, here's the laws, here's how it lays out, here's the evidence of that, here's how we should now perceive this. What is your question now? All of a sudden the question changes. It's what they thought before is not the question. The direction they needed to take was not the direction they were taking. Now, I don't make that decision. Once the foundation is laid, the framework is the problem is correctly framed, the perspective changes. So your information, your facts, your law that you impose to come to the correct, I say can't know about right, but correct or more correct decision for you is all important. So we can go, like I said, that's why it's important to verify everything that you're doing. And yeah, it's a lot of work that way, but in some regard, it's a freeing condition because now you're able to throw out it's like I don't know if you've ever picked any kind of food or fruit. You got to choose between the good and the bad, right? I mean, you got to, if you've ever done it, you got to pick. When you pick a walnut, you find out that there's a worm. When you pick it up, you put it in a different place. You don't take and put the very light walnut that you just picked up and stick it in your bag, in your pouch. You toss it into a spot so it's like you pre-select it. Why? Because when they take it to the buyer and he goes and starts breaking up your walnuts that he bought from you and he starts to try and process them, he sees a lot of moth-eaten walnuts. He's not going to buy from you no more, not give you top dollar. This is a natural thing about that part. It's like when I used to cut brush. We got to the point, my friend and I, we worked together. It was independent but together. It's a nice way to go out in the forest and cut brush. We made sure our brush was A1, better, as best we could make it. Why? Because we got the top dollar. The buyer would see what we did. The buyer would give us special contracts, which we could actually make a little bit more money than given because they could trust us. And here we go back to the currency of the world in one utopian sense, is the trust that you build with each other. That's a loose society as well, in a way. If two is hard to see, you get a group of us that are all doing that, and we understand the parameters and the whys and the wherefores. We conduct ourselves that way because there's a benefit to it. It's the benefit to all of us. And so these are just what we used to, it used to never be a question. This is the thing that gets me. This used to never be a question about how to go about and do this. That has been thrown as a question, and then for us in the United States of America, it's been thrown into question by our own government, which was a real surprise, I would suspect. It's hard to see that because you kind of go through your own experience, and day to day, you almost lose how you got where you were when you had your new awareness. All you see is maybe the new awareness. You realize there's just certain experiences I've had to remember, just hold on to so I can remember where I've come from. Otherwise, it gets lost in how slow the awareness came. Is another thing they've got us away from. That's why they extend time. That's why the Kennedy papers were 50 years and maybe 75 years. That's why anything that gets extended by the government for you to see is extended so far out, like the 28 pages. They just drag it out, and then you saw, as soon as they were not going to give the 28 pages of this 9/11 report, all of a sudden now some of the secrets start pouring out, as I told you they would, in order to soften your view, to give you the knowledge, okay, and then it kind of makes it not so important. And so you don't have an outcry. This is all about managing the pressure of the society's response. It's all about that pressure valve that the occupier must maintain the point where the pressure enough, but not so much that the pressure of the society blows to expose the occupier. And our job, our mission, if we wish to accept it in this war, is to try to lock that valve up, or put something in the way, put more heat to the system, do whatever we can so that they have no way to control these things. And what I've found, if you go to places they can't go, as I said last week, I've said this before, but more now here, when you go to places they can't go, they're defenseless. And again, as I say that, it's taken a couple years now, but I can just tell you, diligent work, consistent, persistent pressure, working to educate people quietly behind the scenes. Don't try to take any notoriety. Don't try to show yourself how good you are, how much you're doing. I mean, you realize I tell you some stuff behind the woodshed of what we do, but you don't hear the details. You don't know where, how, or why. We don't publish too much. You'll see information like Jefferson Mining District. I had one of our miners go back. He's been, part of this thing for a long time. He didn't really, truly appreciate how much information was at Jefferson Mining District that we offer for free, just information. But you'll not see too much what we're doing. And it's partly what we've agreed, that because of the dynamic in the world, you have to work quietly. You can't really be looking for notoriety. You can't be looking for the profit. No, we all could use some cash. The world costs money. That's what the world is. But that's so far down the totem pole that we sacrifice that part in order to try and get this other. And do you know that over time and over a couple of years, it's happening, folks? It's a slow change, but working in a lot of different areas, we're able to bring people back into, with our insight, and you listen behind the woodshed, you have the insight as well. Whether or not you're applying it, I don't know, but with the insight that I bring, in part, applied daily, in different areas through different people, all doing the part that they can do, we're slowly making the changes that bring out what needs to be done. But it's all local. And as soon as that influence gets big enough, you're going to have a better buffering system so that it doesn't look quite so overwhelming and like defeatist in a way. You actually can see a response and in a more correct direction, and you start to get back to the idea that yes, we can manage this a lot better by keeping diligent on our people that we put in representation, or diligent on making sure that the notices before people in certain places, if not everywhere, that what might have an influence, that they can also help to have an influence, whether they understand that or not. And then pretty soon this thing starts to change. But that's what it's taking. You just have to dedicate yourself to something, and that's why I just say it's an evolutionary engagement. We got to see how we got here. We got to see how they're trying to change it, and it was really simple once I noticed that they're trying to change it unlawfully. Yes, there is a law. That's the one you stick to. That's the one that you insist on. The law is in us. And we insist that something goes on. Why? The law is the objective moral basis, not legal. Has no basis. So it doesn't even have identity. Well, they'll give you an identity card, but that's to get you the mind of man locked into the mind of the lack of mind of the fiction, mindlessness. There's no gender. I don't know why people don't pick this out. There is no gender in legal. Why do we have a gender equality question? But this is the division. This is the confusion that goes on. And not many people have enough of this to say, wait a minute, this is a false, I don't know about your agenda. You have a false concepting because you're bringing gender into a legalism that is gender blind. Now, what I'm doing here is explain to you how you get away from that tar baby condition where they start talking like this gender is an issue and feminism is an issue, and really it's a movement to destroy you. You can't discuss it. You can't get into the argument. You got to defeat it before you get there. I don't know about gender. You're making no sense to me. Because when I go to legal, it says there's no respecting of gender. It's neutral. What gender equality? Before legal, there is no distinction and difference. And so I haven't really worked that one out completely. I'm really confused by it. How do you have a gender equality question in a system that has no gender reflection, that has no gender definition, that's gender neutral? You're all neutered you get this, folks. You're all neutered in legal. You're all colored people. You're colored by the law, people. This is why our Title 42, 1981 applies to you as it did the white citizen. Read the law. You're colored by these impositions. The color of law. You're all colored people. Am I talking about racism and stuff? Absolutely not. It has nothing to do with any of that. The racists are the lawyers. Think about that. When you go to what the real word race is, I don't even get off on this thing, but race, the definition I found in the 1974 Doubleday Dictionary was the example of race was the race of lawyers. If you don't think that they have an influence, these trade people trade professionals have an influence on your language. It's even in the regular dictionary that they're going to be the exalted ones. And they're the criminals. You live within their society. Their brotherhood, their household. All these words, we sit right inside what they've done. And these are the people, Clinton again, she's an attorney. These are the people that bring on their world. They bring their world the future we want. Over and over we could discuss this. If we were to sit down and talk about it, you'd be nodding your head, yeah, about all the places I could tell you where you're going to find the proof of what's being said. We're all colored by the imposition that these foreign parasites are putting on us, and we don't have the sense enough to put a match head to its butt, to have it back out of our arm, or to rub a little bit of salt on it, or a little bit of oil, whatever your folk remedy is to get a parasite out you. No, we'd rather listen to the tale and the story, and that's good enough. And that, I'm telling you folks, it's not gonna work. It's just not gonna work. And I told you before, again, we get this information, it's told to us what we want, you try to do your best to become your own independent reporter. Don't go look on the internet, you gotta go find people who know stuff, and you hope that they're telling you right, and you've got to trust them too. Again, trust is really the currency of the world here. I mean, who would you jump into a foxhole with and fight with? And when it comes down to that decision, and you really put yourself in that foxhole, you may start finding there's not a lot of people that you'd trust, and that's a problem. We have to have that trust in each other, and that's not going to happen by getting divisive and divisive and thinking about arguing or thinking that we're together on certain issues, and then all of a sudden we're not on others. All those issues and a lot of the subject matter we hear about are just to keep your mind divided and make you spend time on. There are certain issues that you bring yourself into that give you the view, the perspective that you need to see what you're up against. And that's what I strive to try and do. And then, so when we know our enemy, if you will, we know that enemy, and you know the way it ought to be, if you bring some moral perspective to everything and insist on it, you can quickly see how you, not in all cases, but in most cases, you at least see how you're being violated. And then you just have to insist on not being the victim of that and sit content because they give you victims' rights, that you are being taken care of by your captor and keeper. And this is what they've done in the statutes. You have victims' rights. And they're okay. I mean, once you're in that system, you got to do it. Why not? Pick it up and manifest that into a use for yourself. As we just did, how can the state be it where the state has a statute that says it's a victim in the absence of any victim? Think about this one, folks. The state, the people, are made a victim where there is no victim, and that gives the state the right to step in where there is no victim to put people that are victimless crimes into the system. What I just did for a friend of mine, I said, well, how can the state be the victim when it's the perpetrator of crimes that we've been proving by this body of evidence? So that statute's a fraud. The state can't claim it's a victim in the absence of victims when there is a victim, and it's just being ignored because it advances the scheme and artifice that the state is perpetrating on us, or this victim. So we use the victimhood as a power, not as an excuse. And so there's a way to approach a lot of this, it seems to me. Does that fix a problem? No, because you're up against a criminal. But what it does do is it sets the record and exposes the crime and the method that they've got everybody mesmerized by, charmed. The spell that everyone's under. The Magi's telling you what the spell is about, right? You go to their opinion. What did I tell you? You can't go there. You can't even ask their opinion. Once you ask a question, you've given them power to give you the answer. As I've said before, you destroy that in them. You don't even give them a chance to have the discussion. I'm going to jump way back when I kind of moved off of the discussion into this, but this is exactly now we're coming back to why you got to be able to do this. Remember, I said look at the reflection of what's going on in the Middle East. It's affecting us, the United States. It's a contorted carnival mirror, so you're not going to see it perfectly, but the effect's going to be the same. What they're doing and how they're doing, that they're willing to do it is really probably the more important thing. That they're willing to make these lies and deceptions and continue, and we can call them propaganda, whatever you are, make crime. They're just making crime on all of us. Until we can look through that and call it out, and we target who really had I can't say the authority. They were given in the organization of things the responsibility, obligations, and duties is what I like to speak to. They have no power. They have obligations and duties. The government may call it power because it has the force, but it doesn't mean it's right and it's lawful. That if we hold the so-called officials and employees of the officials into the obligations and duties, I don't care about their job, right? So I don't care about your job. I told this to cops tons of times. I don't care about your job. I want to know about your duty. What's your duty and your obligation? Now, the only contract we have, if we want to go there, is your oath, and I'm going to assume for your sake you took it, and that it means something to you. So what's your duty underneath that oath? What's your obligation? See, it's not a power. This is a limited form. We have to reframe their condition. Now, they've gotten away with that to the point that they have the power to beat you into the ground and kill you. to deny the hierarchy of actual authority, despite the fact they'll tell you the people is the power. The people are crickets. As long as they're crickets, they fall into that thing where appropriate. They get to fall into the excuse, well, it was appropriate because they didn't object. And so we have this hierarchy of authority. We have the deception that goes on. We're told certain things and we don't even know our own structure, and so we're ignorant of it. And so you got to do some investigative reporting, and you hope you find people that are telling you the truth, and that's the trust thing. And so what I did for you way back, and I did it for myself actually, and then I was able to tell you, I went to a friend, and it just happened to be a happenstance that he disappeared from the face of the earth for about 2 or 3 weeks. And when I finally got back in touch with him, it had to do with this Benghazi thing, and he disappeared. And I told you I was a little embarrassed to say it, I had a scoop. 'Cause I'm not really the journalist. We're beyond media here. I'm just trying to tell you what the facts are and how to respond to it. It's not media. But I had a scoop. And the scoop was something I was ignorant of, was the hierarchy of authority in Benghazi. The reflection of what they are willing to do and how they're willing to lie. It was right in our face, as I explained to it way back in 2012. Another article comes out now as time allows and brings out, as our memory fades, there's people's conscience that gets hurt, and they want to finally come out and talk about it. It's another now new report. If we can agree with it or believe it, I believe that there's an error in the report, but I believe I know the limit. And so the perspective of this whistleblower is somewhat confirmed to the extent of his knowledge being in the Air Force. That the Air Force whistleblower has got, they are claiming that the defense for the people that got attacked at Benghazi could have gotten to Benghazi. And I told you, my source told me that this was from the president. Not that I'm not against Hillary to out that all that there's a whole crime behind Hillary. She agreed as well. But the decision to not defend and save the people at Benghazi was with the president. Not a lot of people are saying that. They keep on making a question. This story came out to say that people on the air bases, this is Aviano Air Base in northeastern Italy, in September of 2012, says a team could have gotten to Benghazi in time to save Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods, the former Navy SEALs that were killed by mortar fire during the attack. So we got people on the ground. This is an interesting report of what was happening in Italy, that the Air Force was on alert. They got called, they got briefed, they got put in their positions. There was people all over the place ready to do this. And his statement was, the order to go never came. They were ready to go, and the order didn't come to go. I'm going to suggest to you what my information and the guy I talked to with, my source, who, and I trust him, is a long time back part and parcel to the making of the rules for what happens in these conditions, stated to me that that thing is a natural go. As soon as there's a danger of that kind of an incursion, in particular, it now looks like they've defeated the United States in war by taking the embassy out of land of the United States. There would have been a rescue, not really a rescue, it's a defensive move, military defensive move, by rule, by principle. That the only one to stop that would have been Obama. That this story says we sat there waiting for an answer of when to go. I will tell you that it seems to me more they didn't know, the people in the jets, the people on the flight lines, they didn't know they weren't going. But when they didn't go, when they were briefed, right after they were briefed, the decision had come down. Obama had said, don't go save, don't rescue that. And that order to go was never going to come. But my point here to bring it out is the report's now coming out from people that there was another thing going on. And it's not the way we've been told. And my point about that, Benghazi's way all over there, and it's against another type of people, but you see what has happened, what they destroyed and allowing this to happen, what the United States government allowed and withholding protecting their own, cannot be underestimated for you about who will pay the price when someone's after you and you expected them to be protecting your back. In other words, we're back to being self-reliant. We're back to have to refabricate our connections to each other. And we have to stop the division and stop allowing the division. I see a lot of discussion about all this division in the chats, and it's just it's pretty pathetic, actually. I mean, what I'm seeing is real. It's not an illusion. We can prove it all kinds of ways that it exists. We can shut it down. We can slow it up. We can, whatever the dynamic is, we can interfere with it. So I know it's there. It's not my imagination. It's not not a delusion. It's like if it's science, it's repeatable. So to me, it's beyond a question that everything, and I know it's a hard line to hold. And I'm not perfect. I got to go take time away sometimes. I mean, I got to walk across the road, go look at the garden I'm not really planting this year. I've got other stuff. I've got some stuff going. I'm good. Like I told you, I'm great at making seeds. The ground I have and the space I have is not so much at growing tons of food, but man, I can grow lots of seed, which I think is about as important, where we still have some sourcing. But I've got to take a break too sometimes. It's not a lot. I don't go to the movies. I don't go anywhere. So I'm kind of an odd bird that way. But you do have to take a break. But for the most part, there's got to be a decision that you make. There's something more important that I need to be doing, because these people don't stop. They don't go to sleep at night, it seems. These people are continually working against you. They'll lie to your face. They'll kill people. They'll allow people to be killed. And these are all people that are telling you and smiling and want to take your vote. You know, they want to run the country, want to be your leader. Remember I told you about that leader? It holds a hook with some bait, and they want you to bite so they can rip you out of the water and then club you in the head. That's what they want. They're your leader. So as long as we keep that focus and that paradigm, and we allow these people to go do what this is, I'm surprised there's not an outcry against this Benghazi thing, bigger than that it is. But here's the story of a guy that says that we could have went and saved at least half of that condition. I'm going to suggest to you that maybe he didn't know enough. And he didn't know that he wasn't going to get that. They sat all day on the tarmac waiting for that order. He wasn't going to get that order, folks. And where was that order coming from? It was coming from the president. Not Hillary, Killary, whoever you want to name her. Not any of the subordinates. And we heard the reports about how it was a lot of turmoil over this thing inside the military, and all of a sudden a lot of people got kicked out as well, and it continues till this day. There's a major problem. There's all kinds of these problems that are clearly in our face to notice that the people, the psychopaths in the seats of decision, are not limited on how they'll harm you or to the extent. There is no empathy or care in these people. Why we continue to embrace systems that are not usable to us is really kind of a fascination to me. In that part, it's kind of out of my hands, and I have to kind of give up that part. That's for something else to deal with, because that's beyond me. But it puts more, in my mind, emphasis on what I need to be doing, why I have to focus, why I have to spend the time I do on what I do, maybe even why I talk to myself to guilt myself into doing more. And almost hoping beyond hope against our own nature, that more people will understand what I'm saying and take it to heart and do with what they know. Not try to be something, but do something. We can all take a title. It doesn't mean anything. What are you doing? What are you doing? It's not, and what I look at is it might be, and I haven't even been able to take a look back and see how menial what I think we do might be. I think it's pretty large what we do, but I don't know that it's that large. It just seems like it's that large. Maybe it is small, but even that small bit is doing some changing. So something's going on, and it tends to be affecting bigger things. So I don't know how big this gets. I do know input to it to alter it has been causing an alteration, not an adulteration. And when you, again, this 2016 year jubilee, 2017, you see the Pope absorbing back up the Protestants. You see the world order of 2030 being developed right before your eyes. Includes all this mismanagement of management of people through migration and immigration and the strife it has, and the genetics that goes on, eugenics that goes on, and the fiscal debt loading that it puts on everybody. Now the Paris Accord, which we talked about, is going to be on you. You think that's going to go away just because I talk about it and tell you and point it out and we know about it? No, this is the destruction of your whole world. Your whole way of understanding the world is being altered right before your eyes on non-law. It's soft military is all I can see. Because if you don't follow it directly, you'll find out quickly the military side of this. They're not even hiding that part. When you try to expose it, they're not bashful about how they try to tell you. As it comes out, remember I talked to you about that MEP, I think it was Flanagan, I think it was. He put that video about the TIP agreement, what I called the TI plunder agreement. That was on the Blogcaster a few weeks ago. Maybe on this last week. TTIP is TTI plunder. Well, they jumped on that guy. The European Parliament orders MEP to take down a video about his attempt to visit the reading room for trade documents. Why, folks? Where was the outrage to support that? This guy is trying to represent the people that put him in office. Where is the outrage? Now, if there's a cover-up, we don't know if there is an outrage. Well, more power to the people that created the outrage. But why isn't it so much and didn't hit the Twitter sphere or the Facebook or whatever the heck? Why didn't it come out from there? We have alternative means. But see, people don't respond to this stuff, and they really need to. But that video to expose the incestuous corporate governance structuring that's coming on your life, they want that guy to take down his video. Now, he didn't. So here we have, should I say, the non-dependent resistance? Is that better? Ask Solomon. Is that better, Solomon? in the moment. This is what we start to see as a response to this over oppression and repression. And if we don't take the stand, this MEP did, it's over. He found his place. He's got his spot. He's right there. He did what he could do. We'll see how this turns out. He's resisting even more. But if you're not there, but if you're not doing similar everywhere, wherever you hear anything you see that's not quite right, if you're not engaging at some little bit, you're allowing it. I mean, how can... I think I heard Ron say, we're not even in the game. Yeah, folks, we haven't even come to the game. As soon as we show up, we win. This is what I identified with the gangrene. Under the National Environmental Policy Act, the United States of America, they would, for years now, decades, up until just recently, since at least Jefferson Mining District was established, gangrene would show up to a agency meeting, in this agency world we live in, and they would be the only one that have a speak on the table. The only one that would put evidence on the table. All the producers and the property owners wouldn't even show up to the discussion. Given that it could be a discussion, I've identified now it's a felony, but that's notwithstanding all that. Let's give them a choice. Let's give them a voice. They want to call you have a voice. Not one producer would show up, and if they did, they gave concession to the environmental imposition. And do you know that the National Environmental Policy Act doesn't say that the gangrene can do that? It says that once if a miner were to show up and bring 1 grain of sand and stick it on the balance that the NEPA requires, 1 grain of sand, it would outweigh all the spotted owls in existence for force and effect. And we weren't even coming to the table. We weren't even stepping into the stadium. We weren't even putting our shoes on or even putting on a uniform. We weren't even showing up. And do you know, as soon as we just intimated that we were going to show up, the brakes came on, folks. So yeah, I'm with Ron on Ron Steffens on Game On that. He says that we're not even entering the game. Absolutely. We're not entering the stadium. Well, I don't even know if we got in the parking lot yet. And as soon as we do, I'm just telling you, we've been doing this for what? How many years now? It's 5 years now. Wow. Everywhere we show up now, the balance has to go in favor of NEPA saying in mankind's environment, not in favor of the spotted owl. And I like animals and all that. They're cool. I like them around me. Told you I talk to the lizards. Yes, I do. And they respond. It's kind of fun. And anything else I can find. I mean, it's not about that. It's about you want to talk about balance? Yeah, those that are supposed to keep the world in a good form and utilize its, hopefully we're in our best mind to use our stuff that's available, the natural resources and the sources in the best way. That's available to us to determine. That was what the order was supposed to be. We have to provide for ourselves. So, we don't enter the game. That's why I keep saying, you got to just enter the game. Get involved. I say evolutionarily engage. Don't kind of follow the old route. That's how I started to see the old route being followed is really the danger route, because if they kill it, you don't invent a new one, you're dead. And if you invent a new one, you keep them, it's like the surprise attack, always. And so you have to get in enough to understand what your evolutionary action is. And that's why I try to bring you these ideas, how to see what's going on, who the examples are that are what are doing, what's going on to defeat us, and how possibly to get around that. That's why I also tell you there's no solutions. We don't in a pitched battle, you don't know what might happen. I don't know how many people have fought. I've done SCA, Society for Creative Anachronism. I used to fight in the wars in armor, a medieval recreation society. And I can tell you, stuff happens. It's you would never understand how this thing in a dynamic movement. What comes to bear when you're trying to defend yourself that you didn't even think you could try and do. And it was in the involvement and the engagement that you were pressed to have to, that you developed this capacity. And it could become in a lot of different ways. So that was an interesting side lesson for me. You can do, like I keep telling you, just jump in. You'll be surprised at all you can do and what you can do and how little it takes to do. It's just a matter of doing. Not being. Don't be important. Do important. Go to the game. Be a participant in the play, not in the stadium. Not in the stands, I mean. Not as a spectator. This is not a spectator sport. That's the problem. Stop being in the peanut gallery. Just show up and you become important, as long as you are doing important things. So this MEP is doing what he can. He's resisting. He's also exposing. If you're not there, you can't resist and you can't expose. You can't be the one the heat comes on. And what I'm finding is that it doesn't even come on us. It's a lot of people running, really, from what we do. And they're kind of trapped in their officialness and their authority. We use their authority to trap them. And we don't try to belittle anybody, but in the process of showing what they don't know and what they've been evading and the criminals that they are, they become belittled and they start seeing that. And we don't exploit any of that. That's not what we're there for. Really, we're just simply getting people to want to understand better so we can have them do better. The thing they said they were going to do, we want them to do. But there has been no guidance. And we had no intelligence in us about that as people. And behind the woodshed, I try to bring those principles that I've seen that we really have lost. When we re-impart those, they seem to work. And again, I don't get lost in it's legal or lawful, all that. It's either right or it's wrong in how it works. When you come up with something, it's either going to help people and not hurt people or not. It either applies to people universally in a helping way if that's what you're there for, or it doesn't. And when you come and say, wait a minute, you've come against me, what you've done sounded like a good idea, but now I'm kind of hurt by what your actions are, then there should be what should I say? Some concern, right? I mean, not just some. They should really, people should be working out the part that didn't hurt you, and not disregard it. Like my main problem is like in the government. Where did these people in government? Where did they get, when someone elected you into office, where did you all of a sudden become all powerful and all knowing that somehow you believe you can determine my property, its extent, my remedies about that, its protection, my peace? When did you, by vote, get that capacity? I mean, where did that magic happen? Then when you profess to be an attorney and you had an exalted view and an enlightened view, how come you still come against me in those capacities? Even so. Now, they don't have an answer for that because they're criminals. I mean, it's just simple. That's the simple thing. And there's an endless questioning that they'll do for you. But where'd you get this and where'd you get that? Well, wait a minute. We turn it around and say, well, you're the one who took it on to know, Mr. Enlightened One. You are supposed to know. You're not supposed to act until you know. Now that really kind of fries them. And so as I was telling you before, don't make a question of all this. Take this information, watch the examples that are out in the world doing what they can, watch the examples that are doing what they do to destroy you, start synthesizing this for yourself in your own Hegelian dialectic and create your own synthesis. You don't let them run that show. You don't let them run the game. You have to interject. You can add an alternative game. What you're doing is you're interjecting a true power, and what that ends up being is your consent. Your consent is simply imposed when you resist it. It's not that difficult. The power that you have to resist is used against you when you don't. If you can keep it. Right? They're licensed to come and steal from you. And so this MEP tries to show what TTI plunder is all about, and they come after him. Good. They need to rally up around this guy. So I'm not too worried or prejudiced about that he's a representative in a state. Well, this is where we come, folks. This is what we do. We tried to do this to work it out better, and some people have gotten in to circumvent all the structuring in there that we've established in order to subvert us. And we talk a good game about all we know about the Constitution and the organization and all this stuff. You know, I look around and I don't see the substance of it. Again, people want to be important instead of do important. That's a generality. Don't get your panties in a wad here. I'm just trying to tell you, in reality, we're not doing the stuff we need to do. For all of us, I have to I told you that last week. I question myself a lot. Am I doing that right thing? Am I kind of lulling myself into a complacency? What else am I missing? If anything, maybe nothing. Is it correct temperament for where we're going and the direction that we're taking? Again, you bring the law. You bring your perspective. You bring your principles. That's the law. And if it's law and has a moral component, it's not going to likely violate people. Rule of law takes hit in court's order to commit perjury. And this is fascinating. This is getting back over to reflexive law. This is another imposition. It's not constitutional. It's not established. It's not governmental. It's not due process. It's what they use to make up. It's these concepts they make to move this process along to the future they want, which you can see the evidence of all over. It has to do with your eternal debt, your mortgage to everybody else. Nobody gets left behind because you're all in the stinking abyss suffering together. Pretty simple. The rule of law takes hit as a court orders someone to commit perjury. Is a fascinating view. You need to kind of see how this is going. You need to put your mind in how this works and what you're up against with these bar members. In a case with major implications for free speech and due process, it's funny what people focus on too, folks. You understand, a court ordering you to lie is way, 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 at least in my estimation, maybe everyone, you can argue with this, I suppose, way, way, way beyond free speech and due process. And the only thing I can identify is just organized crime. I mean, I'm really simple that way. I really don't have I don't have this immense intellect to come up with all I wasn't even good enough to come up with the prefix non on dependent to come up with really the better answer that I really ought to. So that's who you're dealing with behind the woodshed here. I'm doing my best. But this author believes that it's a infringement on free speech and due process. I will agree, in part. It is an infringement on those, but wow, how minimal is the harm here in his perception or her perception? In a major case, major implications of free speech and due process, an appeal by Doreen Hendrickson, a mother jailed last year on contempt of court charges, was for refusing a federal court order to perjure herself, was officially denied. The court claimed that it did not have a rule on the illegality. It did not have to rule on the illegality of unconstitutionality of the court order that was supposedly violated, or on whether it was appropriate to the trial court to instruct the jury not to consider the legality of the demands. What a mouthful. I have to just tell you, to cut through all that, do you know that contempt of court is a private charge of the judge against you? It can be both civil and criminal. And so there's really no constitutional connection, is there? It's allowed by their rules to do so. This used to be what the patriots used to say when you walk into court, and I would advise this as well when you start getting into this territory, if it please the court. If it please the court. And if they let you to continue to talk, then it pleased the court. If it didn't, you try to say something to please the court. And so you give yourself that little soft spot to land that says, well, wait a minute, he pleased the court. He allowed me to speak. If it pleased the court, I don't want to speak because of this. You have to have a reason. Objection with a reason. That's the standard practice. But so here's this thing that this court says you're going to commit perjury, and then the court gets this woman for contempt. That's not actually on the perjury, is it? And this is how they change and subtly alter the point, the frame from which they'll decide. So if this ruling is allowed to stand, observers and legal experts warned of potentially devastating consequences to the rule of law, due process of law, judicial integrity, freedom of speech, and all of America's constitutional protected rights. That list is still too short, folks. But let me just show you, the rule of law is actually the rule o' law, and it's contrary to everything following in that list. The rule o' law is to promote the function of the Bar Association's plunder on this world. Rule o' law and democracy. Rule o' law, they get to continue because you are in mob rule. And I've said this before, when you start seeing these terms and you start applying them diligently, you start reading a whole different dynamic, even through people's discussions about these conditions. Rule o' law is counter to due process, where you come contrary to what the occupier wants. And they'll do whatever they want, and now you've got a name, it's called reflexive law. There's no law. So how can it be the rule of law? Why isn't law just good enough all by itself, that you have to have a rule o' law? Now, they pretend to have due process, but when you go impose that supposed due process, they will deny you at every turn. This has been my experience. And then I said, okay, they denied the due process. I'm going to stick them in a condition that when they deny me due process, I win. What did I just say there? I've just explained how I approached and how I've helped author up the paperwork and the principle and strategy and the tactic of our injunction in 2013, where they failed to answer. They couldn't come to the game, folks. They didn't come in the stadium. Won by default, right? Isn't that something else that Ron Steffen said? You win by default. They win by default? Well, we win by default too. That fast. Just put yourself in the game. And then make it, if you can. You know, I'm totally surprised that they didn't answer, because I expected every rule said they were supposed to. So it wasn't like I planned. I'm so brilliant that I planned that part. They did that on their own. That was icing, folks. Complete icing to the cake we baked. But this is how you start running this against them. You don't allow them to bring their reflexivity in. It's literally a reflex action to what you're doing, not substantiated by anything. is what's coming down, and this is what I really want to point out here. You're seeing it now implemented. But I also wanted you to understand that the contempt of court is a charge outside of the case. So, basically the government could force anyone to say anything under oath, critics of the ruling observed. The attorneys representing Hendrickson, Mark Cedrone, even compared the government's efforts to force his client to say what the government wants to Islamic Sharia law demanding the affirmation of Allah. The panel of the Sixth Circuit United States Court of Appeals in Cincinnati that upheld the lower court ruling did not cite Islamic law. This is a big game anyway, so be careful on what they're using and why they're using it. If you understand what they're trying to do here, remember the reflexive law removes all law. It doesn't matter. It'll be even beyond everyone. Sharia, they're bringing Sharia. No, they're bringing reflexive judge-created opinion immediately into the case to become reacting to, no different than a reflex action, to what you're doing in order to protect that system. Instead, it relied on obscure legal theory to justify a decision to avoid rulings on what experts say are the key issues. And this is what that whole condition is. This is like an attorney denying. You never argue the key issues if you don't have the law, right? I mean, this is just to me, this is just a court case. The judge is imposing what lawyers do anyway in all court cases, but he's doing it as a judge. He's not sitting as the independent arbiter over the case, administering the law. You're seeing interference by way of rule, and that is rule o' law. Not the law. It's the rule o' law. It's this private trade profession imposition, developed by the courts themselves to justify judicial power. The rarely used doctrine is known as collateral bar. In essence, the doctrine purports to allow the court orders to stand and is aimed at ensuring that the court's effective authority is upheld. However, the Supreme Court has ruled that transparently invalid orders are not shielded from review by the collateral bar doctrine, something the family and its supporters say the appellate court refused to acknowledge, which is stating that's what they'll have to do if they want to move on and delay this justice and even more, put it back in the system for decision, more time and energy to actually move this on an appeal as an error of the judge before it. Whether or not collateral bar is active can be argued against contempt, I'm not so sure yet. This is the other problem. There's an overbiting justice that has to be done, though, and that's where the people come in, when they start raising the pitchforks and torches and say, well, if you go in that direction, Supreme Court, maybe that's not going to be so good for y'all. And we're crickets to that as well. Nonetheless, the reliance on that doctrine, the collateral bar, even their words, collateral bar, everything's bar association, everything's barred to you. You don't get to practice unless they say so. When you try to, they beat you up because it's a private system and it's a state agency in a lot of instances. So they are controlling this. I haven't had time to even read about all this part of the case. There's something that they want to push through, and they're going to do it this way until someone pushes it to the wall, where appropriate, or if they can keep it, is ringing loudly right here. This woman now is forced to hope that they can put enough embarrassment on justice, actual justice, not rule of law, how it got there, but actual justice, that the Supreme Court, a Supreme Court, would take cognizance of this thing and throw this down for the apparent violation it appears to be. Nonetheless, the reliance on that doctrine, the collateral bar, is how the three-judge panel, in ruling to uphold Hendrickson's conviction for contempt, was able to sidestep the real issue in the case. But see, that's the point. They went to contempt. It's an independent collateral action to begin with by the judge for failure to comply with the judge's order. And she didn't answer to show how the judge's order was not valid, kind of what they said earlier on, that you're not having to answer to invalid orders. Is why I suggest to you repeatedly, you have to go after the right issue. You have to object, like administrative sense. You have to object immediately that they even have an administrative authority. You got to cut their legs out before they even walk in the room. Or you show them that their legs are going to be cut off physically if they do. And that means you're going to have them arrested because they're criminals otherwise. And you set up the facts to prove that. It's not just my opinion here, I'm telling you. You have to set this up in paperwork. Anyway, so they're saying that it's a sidestep, but actually the issue was a collateral attack on her through the judge. So this is a collateral bar in that sense, but is it reviewed against a real issue? Well, what do they say? The real issue is a question. Her contempt is not a question, is it? So, this is kind of an interesting matter. I viewed it as something showing you the reflexive nature that the judiciary is going to, and it's something that you have to pay attention to. And for me, it gives me confirmation that you have to take this authority out before it even gets going. And obviously, with an attorney, that's not going to happen in this case, and so I'm not going to analyze all that. But they set up what they need to set up. They'll get you to make evidence in the way they need to have you make it up. They'll get you to try and do whatever they need to do for the agenda. You know, this is what the whole system is looking to do. They're not supposed to actually do it quite so obvious. They try to do it a lot more subtle. This is that soft imposition that they tried to do. They make it look authorita. It is authorita, but you think it's actual power and authority. Partly because you went to them to ask them. And so this fabrication of evidence, this gathering of evidence, the creation of ways to get evidence is an ongoing, evolving. I talk about evolutionary engagement. They're evolving in how they acquire this stuff. We now hear a bit proven, if we didn't have another thought before, hidden microphones exposed as part of government surveillance in government surveillance program in the Bay Area. They are now gathering, before you even get to the courts, they got hidden microphones everywhere that we've been told about, but now there's proof of this, that nowhere it seems to be private, even in public, and I've had issue with that myself, and this article brings that up. What it starts to say here is the hidden microphones that are part of a clandestine government surveillance program that has been operating around the Bay Area has been exposed. Now here's what I wanted to put into this. If they start getting this audio, it's not about even the fabrication. If they get an inkling, like some investigator believes a crime is going on, and he puts a certification in an affidavit, he says that he has probable cause to believe that crime is going on, and it looks like the government, it's something the government wants to get in on. They put that before a judge, and they explain to the judge how that's working. The judge is sitting in behind to be able to allow this and set up and do the legwork to figure out the logistics on how they're going to legitimize this in the case against you. And this is the problem with dealing, it's like the chain of title and dealing with not the title, but the rule of law use of the evidence that works against you. In a situation where the government is really all powerful. Why wouldn't it be? You're in its own system, aren't you? So the imagine standing at a bus stop, talking to your friend and having your conversations recorded without you knowing. It happens all the time, and the FBI doesn't even need a warrant to do it. Federal agents are planting microphones to secretly record conversations. Jeff Harper of KPIX5, security analyst and the former FBI agent, said they put microphones under rocks, they put microphones in trees, they plant microphones in equipment. I mean, there's microphones that are planted in places that people don't think about because that's the intent. Now, first of all, that could be, but remember, they're trying to put some fear on you that you're living in a place that has no privacy. Now, that might be true. You're living in a place with less and less and less privacy, so let's be cognizant of that. But let's also understand the underlying psyop here, the mental imposition that they're putting on you. That, in fact, they're now proving one little thing is going on. They're now expanding this part out, which may or may not be actually the case. The point being they want you to know you're under scrutiny. As we told Snowden was there to put the information, and we are responding by being less open. But there's a question here still at a bus stop. And I guess I want to get to that part. That in looking at this thing, people still have an expectation of privacy even in a public area. And this is going to be where they're trying to, I believe that they're going to try and destroy this last little vestige of a concept. When you talk to someone privately, in the open, you're not talking to anybody else. No one should have the right to create any kind of a way to interfere or to intercept that conversation that you were talking private to somebody else in public. This is one of the last remaining things about this. They've given a carte blanche license to be able to do this in the public, that you don't have an expectation of privacy in the public. But that's not true. And there hasn't been a whole lot of pushing in this area that, when you're standing on a street corner only talking to someone next to you, and you are not intending that be a public conversation, like being in a public meeting or being on the street or yelling your lungs out or in a riot, all that kind of stuff. If you're just talking with the intent to be private to somebody else, there shouldn't be any, maybe that's an opinion here, but there shouldn't be any advantage that the government can take to take your information, to grab your comments, because more importantly, they're utilizing this collection of data to do they're doing all kinds of things, the worst of which would be to fabricate that you're, like we heard so many stories, that you're intending to do crime when in fact they're just innocent actions that someone who has a mental defect in their mind that sees crime around every corner has just looked into what you've done and fabricated one for you. And so this brings up the knowledge and intent provision. That's also missing. Let me go back to the other story. In contempt of court, if she didn't make some kind of effort to show she wasn't intending to be in contempt, or wasn't knowing actually, she's essentially agreed, where she hasn't made the record of that. This was kind of showed to you if you've heard about Sheriff Arpaio in Arizona. He got hit with a contempt of court, but he made a reservation, and so now that reservation sits there as a two-part reservation. Didn't intend or know. He made that reservation. It's possible this lady before didn't make that reservation. So again, you have to know how to address these people to make the public record. Again, this is all about people looking into a record to say, oh yeah, they're guilty, clearly. And if your voice is not in there, your record is not in to show how you were not what they said, then anybody looking in will agree, and you're not going to get the force and effect of those in the peanut gallery that might be stepping onto the field as helpers or whatever to help you to expose this criminality. So I say you really have to learn. They didn't teach us in school this stuff. You have to learn how to formally communicate with this. It's not my imposition on you. I'm not saying you. I'm saying you have to. I'm saying they're imposing that just by the way they work things. It's rule of law and democracy. It's not law. It's not law and due process that you thought about. So between these two stories, you can see, we can interrelate them or show the distinctions of why it's so dangerous, these questions, and how we really cannot accept what we're told by these people, even the ACLU especially, on what you think is what your rights are. You have to assert what that is. And when if you get the, I don't say when maybe it is a when now, but if you get the opportunity, make sure that you're asserting these things. Make sure you draw those lines. No, I didn't intend this to go public, and they didn't have the right to snag it. And this may go over farther, the thermal imaging and things like that, where they are trying to get information of you from the streets. If you didn't intend, if we get this intent and knowing, maybe that will be enough to shut part of that down. But until someone starts to throw that out there, even way ahead of the game, even before a court case, but if you don't get that in the public specter where people are thinking about it, it gets silently destroyed. And that's the problem. Silence is killing us. And so we can't be silent anywhere. Everything is under attack. The occupier wants to attack everything that is going to interfere with it. And remember, it's acting in its own security always. And these crime scenes called courts are working to the security of the state. It's so-called. It's actually the private state, but nonetheless, they say it's for your own good on top of it. That has to be destroyed. And so where we step up, where we stand up, things can start changing back and you start getting the question going. We have another report now. We were talked about Obama scare, imposition on your life. It's where they want to go in the future. The future they want is your servitude to a system where they have control of how your health is going to go, to treat it, not cure anything, but treat you. And we've talked about the dynamic, but federal judge rules Obamacare is being funded unconstitutionally. Obamacare is being funded unconstitutionally. Did you hear that, folks? All right, so the judge comes out and says that there's no appropriations, correct appropriations, lawful appropriations for this tax law, right? House Republicans won round 2 in a potentially historic lawsuit Thursday when a federal judge declared the Obama administration was unconstitutionally spending money to subsidize health care insurers without obtaining appropriations from Congress. That's where this story essentially ends. I won't read more. Without obtaining appropriations of Congress. We've said over and over, attack the appropriations and attack what they do as misappropriations. In other words, they're doing this without federal funding. It's unlawful what they're doing. They're coming under a call of authority. That's in most states a felony right there when they come after you to do this. But remember something that's not being talked about here. I said, don't ever forget about this. Don't forget about Benghazi. Don't forget who the authority is. Obama there and Obama here. What did he do? Where was the appropriation supposed to originate? From the Congress. But that's not the appropriation. Where was the law supposed to be originating? For the tax. From the Congress. So this story, this ruling is actually one step behind it. And this judge didn't stop that. So we can go, oh, good, they're going to, Republicans won round 2. No, these are two parties, two wings of the same bird of prey. They're not actually getting at the core, are they? They're not getting at the point that this law for taxation has no constitutional standing at all. It can't even have money appropriated to it. But if we want to go to here that there was no money appropriated, we impliedly agree that it's a valid law. So I just want you to, again, I'm just trying to point out how you start to look at this. And if we do the wrong thing, we do something, but it's the wrong thing. It's a capitulation at least. It's an agreement to what's remaining. If you jump into a case too far down the path, you're still agreeing to the question or to the jurisdiction. As I've told you, pre-plea remedies and avoidance, as soon as you arrange the court, do arraignment and arrange the court, you've waived a whole lot of arguments. They could be arguments at the point of a question, unless you have proof that they're the fact of lack of jurisdiction. If you don't use those and exercise those up front, you lose them, and then you get these kinds of decisions, and I haven't told you, and some of you should have said it in your mind, as I've told you before, that this is probably coming out of a USDC court. That judge has no authority anyway, even though I'm against Obamacare outright, completely. But the fact of the reality has to be analyzed. This whole thing is a crime. So why give the failure of appropriations air when the entire thing is a crime? Allows them to let you think that it was a valid law and we could appropriate for it. You see how that works too. So I thought this was fascinating dynamic on how the government will get our mind. They'll lead us by the nose. I tell you, take that ring out of your nose, folks. Quit being an accessory to the crime against you. They're going to lead your nose to water, and they're going to drown you. They'll force you to drink. That's what these laws are all about. They're going to force you, and they're going to tell you that they're going to do it without control. They're going to get you to do it because they're going to get you to think that you have to. And the crickets don't have a brain in their head, apparently. But shockingly, they're standing in the wrong spot of the earth anymore. They're gonna find out. So you're not safe by being a cricket either. So you can sit back and say federal judge rules Obamacare being unconstitutional. Constitutionally, I guess there's going to be some more delay on this. Why this hasn't been argued to not be a law that was originating out of the Congress to begin with, that they could appropriate. Why that question hasn't been already done, even after Roberts said so, is a fascination to me as well. And I hear crickets from all sectors on that point, even till today that I'm even telling you about this deception. Now talk about deception, and I don't even know what to call this one, folks. To me, this is a non-funny. It's a redundant oxymoron. I don't even know what to call this thing. Artificial. You talk about these judges and the attorneys, the bar, the profession. It's just a business. It's a trade business. It's a trade union running your life. But there's a trade union that's going to take on an artificial intelligent lawyer named Ross, who has been hired to actually determine bankruptcy information, proceedings. Files and take on cases. 50 plunderers, blood-sucking parasites, bar association members who will put on and advance and promote sustainable debt. If you don't get this whole thing, again, Rule 1005 in 1994 Oregon Rules of Bankruptcy says a name in all caps is a debtor, corporation, legal entity that after designation as a corporation by all caps, mixed case is appropriate. So once they name it one place, you don't have to see it in all caps to be the same debtor corporate legal entity that they designate everything in bankruptcy. If you don't hear the connections here, but artificial intelligence, folks, is going to determine these cases for this household. The world's first artificially intelligent attorney, built on IBM's cognitive computer Watson, was designed to read and understand language, postulate hypothesis, and when asked questions, research and then generate responses. Watson on Ross sounds wrong, first of all. Secondly, artificial intelligence and lawyer seems redundant, but it also seems oxymoron. And so I'm getting confused because the lawyer is a fiction representing fictions, artificial. You can only have artificial intelligence working on artificial conditions in an artificial justice. This story was really fascinating to me and confusing at the same time if you understand like my problem. This is artificial intelligence dealing with artificial matters. With a group of people that have artificially brought themselves to prominence that are really affecting your life adversely, as a plunder, as an outgoing theft, upon utilizing legal fictions, artificial entities, to do so. In apparently a gender PC way, Ross on Watson. Folks, sometimes I just get confused. Artificial intelligent lawyer. I see that all the time, folks. Google AI. Now, this is where I left off last week and got up to here, and I was going to move on about the imposition of this big data, folks. This is a big... The Matrix is not a movie. I haven't said that in a long time. Matrix is not a movie. This is the world we're allowing and going to at some level. I think it's fascinating and fantastic. On another level, there's so much that's wrong that's leading the way that, again, we don't step up and figure out ways to disassociate, become non-dependent of this condition. It's going to consume us and consume our futures and consume all of our abilities to do anything. Google AI gains another artificial intelligence system. I mean, artificial and intelligence seems to be an oxymoron too. I don't know where to begin with this problem. This really confuses me at some level. But then again, you're dealing with someone who started out understanding my data displays when I got into computers were IBM Selectric teletype. So we played Moonlander by character drawing on a piece of paper. At any rate, so it may be easy to confuse me. Google AI gains access. I realized here today I was at the point when assembly language was the kind language to go to when there was the so-called higher Fortran and Pascal languages, and then they went to C. I just realized where that is in this dead digital world. And C started to confuse me because you get in the mind of as an assembler, assembly language programmer. They used to call us programmers, not coders. And your mind kind of has to shift a bit. And it was almost a little bit too much for me, where I said, "Am I a natural programmer?" And when I started looking at these new so-called higher languages, it didn't seem to gel so well. And I said, "Well, maybe I'm not. I could do stuff, but it just didn't seem as natural." But that's how far back I look at when they talk about AI. I think about me making assembly language programs for, at that time, computers that responded to you in teletypes. You would ask questions, and it would make up answers. And this is what you're dealing with in AI. You're dealing with people that think that they can predict the future on a conglomeration of instructions of how they see the world and can put it together. It is that Google is getting 1.2 million confidential records from NHS, this is Europe, in Canada, in the UK, patient records. A private company is getting your patient records. I talked about this in the heels of Obamacare and them focusing on this case not being the proper appropriations. as if they can appropriate for this crime that Congress did not actually originate. That this is where it starts to go. We're seeing the big data attachment through private corporations that are multinational. This is global, folks. You can't ignore this one now. Multinational, big, powerful, data-centric places that now control the decisions of data. Oh, sure, Google's going to do this one. The confidential patient information in the UK is being given to this Google. Oh, because they're going to help these people that are there, that they're trying to do, these chronic illnesses they're trying to cure. But this is such a thin veil of fraud here. I just almost, in a way, shocking that it's allowed. It's already here, folks. This is going on. We talk about the death squads. Well, it's going to be Ross. Ross is going to talk to you now on the back of Watson. They're enjoying themselves or something. But Ross is going to say, "Well, you're a bankrupt. We don't want to pay more for you. We've sucked enough out of you. You're as much debt as we can put on you, and you can't pay any more. So we're going to move you on. We made more. We're like Lay's potato chip factory. We just made a few thousand more while you were wheezing your last breath." In an agreement uncovered by the New Scientist, Google and its DeepMind artificial intelligence wing of prey has been granted access to current and historic patient data in 3 London hospitals run by the Royal Free NHS Trust, covering 1.6 million individuals. That would include any chronic illness people may be suffering from, the circumstances over why they were admitted, for example, if they had suffered a drug overdose. The agreement provides Google with access to data going back 5 years and is far more expansive than expected. I just stop here, folks. This is it. They're going to put everything on AI. The Matrix is not a movie. The third-party companies of profiteering companies get access to your private lives. They're going after everything that's a necessity for you. I don't know how we're going to figure this thing out. That's why I kind of promote some of the more holistic avenues that you can find that extricate and separate yourself from this system. It's going to make it more and more difficult, but they're in every aspect of what your life will need, and it's coming on us faster than I would have ever thought. Actually, artificial intelligence, folks, is what they're putting on this. You get to go to a bankruptcy attorney now that it's an artificially intelligent. That's good enough to run your case, too, if you understand that part. I guess it doesn't take much. And this is what our world is. This is where our world is coming to because we're watching and allowing it. This now leads me into another position. We talk about these artificial intelligence decisions being made. I suppose maybe they could be focusing on making it better, but it doesn't. Not when Google gets involved. They said do no evil. To think the opposite, and then you see what's going on. Oh, they'll give you the excitement. They'll give you all the stuff that makes life wonderful, like a living, life through chemistry. It was supposed to be a great deal. Well, now it's big data. You don't realize what's going on behind the scenes. It's all an advertisement. Research. Medical error is now third leading cause of death in the United States. Obamacare is not looking so good anyway, even if it was lawfully put in. That Google AI, DeepMind, might be involved. It doesn't encourage me either. That the medical errors, just by themselves, doctors actually doing medicine, are now the third leading cause of death, folks. When I tell you that a license is permission to do crime, this is probably the definition, the confirmation right here. Nightmare stories of nurses giving potent drugs meant for one patient to another, and surgeons removing the wrong body parts have dominated recent headlines about medical care. Lest you assume that those cases are the exceptions, a new study by patient safety researchers provides some context. Their analysis, published in the BMJ on Tuesday, shows that the medical errors in hospitals and other healthcare facilities are incredibly common, and may now be the third leading cause of death in the United States, claiming 251,000 lives every year, more than respiratory disease, accidents, stroke, and Alzheimer's. Enough said, folks. This is the system that they've been putting up for us, and this is what we've been accepting. And You're taking your life into your own hands. And what I found interesting was a corollary story that the third leading cause, I know my mind fixed on the number 3, but right at the same week, and this was a few weeks ago, they bring out another story with it, that this medical errors were part of what they also do is this antibiotic prescription, and that report came in that 1 in 3 antibiotics prescribed in U.S. are unnecessary. Major study finds. One can only guess at when you misapply antibiotics how much that's contributing to the death industry called American medical, United States medical. Nearly a third of the antibiotics prescribed in doctors' offices, emergency rooms, and hospital-based clinics in the United States are not needed, according to the most in-depth study yet to examine the misuse of these life-saving drugs. All right, so if they're misused, they're life-causing, death-causing drugs, apparently, or contribute, right? So this story came in consistent with these. Actually, these 3 stories came together. The overprescription of antibiotics, and that's not the only one, folks. You know all the other ones, the off-label uses and all that. They don't even study that. Boy, you probably know why. And then you have medical errors causing a third the deaths. They don't outlaw that, that's for sure. And then Obamacare is supposed to administer that on a mutual basis. You can't be looking into the future at a good future of that. These are the people these are all. And then you find this is all tied to your social obligation, your social mortgage. And don't forget the bankruptcy, because that sits there. You're all a dead entity if you don't throw that off. Don't underestimate the connection here. That this is your future if you choose to accept being a cricket. If lightning doesn't come out of the sky because it was just charged by a solar wave of some sort, and you get shocked into oblivion, then maybe the antibiotics that you're given by the doctor a little later will cause a condition that will kill you. How will you know? They're the experts, right? Experts say. They have the license, don't they? Anybody with a license is doing a crime. They're doing a crime just so much that's allowed. And not to point out anybody that has to because of the condition we find ourselves in. That includes all y'all with a driver's license. And no, I'm not saying just throw that off. In fact, I'm talking with people right now. Keep them and use them to your advantage while you have them. They can only get you that limited amount too when they can get you. But you can throw in on that and say, hey, well, I see right here, this license is to say that I was violating my right to use the highways over here. This statute, my roadway statute says I have the right to use it. When did I become a criminal? Can you point out how you jumped across this gap between commerce and production, commerce and the right to use because it was granted to us because we the people made it? Where was your authority to take what I made? I, as the group of people that we all live with. But anyway, so we can use these so-called licenses, and once we find we have them, even deceptively so, to actually limit our liability just like they're supposed to be made. But we limit our liability in the way that we use them to attack the system, to out it. And it's going to be a longer battle, but the point is you can still do it. You can be on one of the people that makes the evidence of how this is another style of crime. Just as you hear me talk about it, but not get too in depth. So the license is given to doctors to prescribe these antibiotics 3 times more than what they 1 in 3. The rest of pharma is doing that. This is licensed to kill people. And now the proof is in. It's third most deadly is your medical profession. They give license to do certain things. They give immunity. That's another form of license. You can't be held accountable. Now we're going to vaccines. Polio vaccine is causing the new polio. Not much different than we're just finding out now. If we didn't understand it before, the measles, I think it was, over in Disney, where the people that were given the vaccine were actually spreading it, and so they blame the ones that didn't even get the vaccine. They blame the ones that that weren't involved, and they make those people the criminal instead of outing, even in an immunity sense. You see how heinous this is. These people have immunity, and they're still blaming people that are innocent. Are you getting that, folks? How heinous these people are. They have these people, corporations are people too. They have immunity and they're still blaming the innocent people. Is that not Cain and Abel? Is that not the definition of Cain killing Abel? As a reference, folks, just to understand, there's nothing new here. The polio vaccine's causing a new polio. It's mutated, folks. I want to get in. You can read the story, the blogcaster, it's there. You can read it. I just want you to understand the government, the force that allows crime needs to at least be put under a bigger constraint than we have allowed to it. And that's internal with what would have happened. What's coming on us is on top of this. This is governance, global governance is on top of this. And we heard the connection and the consistency when the WHO, the WHO, not the rock group, not the owl, but the WHO, actually brokers pharma's poisons around the world. Under what? Global governance. And because you have a social mortgage debt to everybody, you are going to have to do what we tell you. And we're not saying that's control, because you are obligated. Boy, they sure flipped the duty and obligation on you quick, didn't they? Same thing I'm trying to show you, you need to do for them. And we can do it now. We can do a lot more authoritative, because everything they do outside of your established system, at least in the United States of America, is defeatable because it's not constitutional. It's not done by actual proper legislative authority. And this is what we're finding dealing with the legislature, who thought that they were passing laws under legislative authority. Those laws, the so-called laws they pass, are crimes. And when you get to property law, you understand that. You understand how to defeat that pretty quickly. And then all they want, you'll know you're on point. Where did you get that information? Fascinating. Not solve the problem. Not, we didn't know we did that. We'll fix it. No, where did you get that information? And then deny, push back. If you don't think there's just two classes of people, one that's in the seats of decision and the power over your life, those that we hear in the United States, everyone's supposed to be treated equal, and the plebes, well, in Germany, I guess not so much. Germans unhappy. Just unhappy, folks. Germans unhappy with alternative swine flu vaccine for politicians. Apparently they've identified that the politicians get a different vaccine than all the people. They make additions to the one they give all the people. But remember, alternative swine flu, that's the pig's fly flu, folks. That pig is still trying to fly. And that's all the people aren't happy about, that there's an alternative given to the seats of decision in their country, and they're not treated equal. They'll agree that the pig's fly flu is real. They'll only complain that someone else is getting something different than us. How screwed up we are around the globe on this is pretty fascinating too. Just to let you know, we heard that everybody, the governments, the people in the government were getting different medications. Here we are. We now have more evidence. You can get it on the blogcaster again. I really don't know what to say more than to point it out to you. These things. I mean, it's here to see, and you can agree. I don't see how it's any different in the United States. And if you knew where to track this down, you could track it down locally, and you can out the whole thing. You started out by saying there's a distinction. You find the alternative that's being given, and you go, why? Why is that? Because this is harmful to us, and the reason why it's harmful is because of these additives. And that's if we agree that the one that you're getting is any good. We think that's a violation too. And you have your dossier of facts on how that's the point. Will get us back to the immunities and the fact that they're unproven this, the herd immunity is not a fact. All this stuff you could actually say. It gets you into the game, folks. It gets you in with a home run hit. That you just have to sit there and persist. Unhappy with alternative, but not unhappy with the fact that the fraud of the pig's fly flu exists. So we have these frauds of these diseases. Wouldn't you think it'd be real easy then to make a magic bullet for all of them? Well, here it is, IBM, another IBM, folks, consistent here, who's on through history, this company, IBM. Magic bullet, so-called. Magic bullet could destroy Zika, Ebola, and herpes. Firm enlists Watson, again, supercomputer, to combat killer viruses. So if you have an invented virus, a company can come along and create an artificial intelligence to create the antidote, right? We know Zika hasn't been proven. We know Ebola was a fabrication at the level they did it. We know there were pandemics. They were invented. And herpes is a whole different kind of thing, but it's created again. We found out that's created and put into their vaccines. So they are going to be a fabricated condition that now IBM's Watson, the one that rides, that Ross likes to ride on, is going to tell us the answer and give us a Zika, Ebola, herpes, or other virus magic bullet. Now, that story was kind of fascinating, and the idea that they're trying to promote that they have the right, these artificial intelligences, our ability to do this. Now, they might have an ability to synthesize this information down to information that we need and can use. I'm not going to deny that. But when they're dealing in these things that are invented, I have a big question. My fascination behind this is and I can't do this. I don't know if I have the time to pull this all together everywhere to go. I think you're just going to have to go to the Blogcaster to see it. There's a picture in this story of the magic bullet and IBM and Watson creating the supervised virus killer that is of apparently a virus. They're showing you this depiction of the Zika virus. What was fascinating to me is just a couple days later, Chandra movies capture expanding debris from a stellar explosion. There's a NASA website of the Chandra Observatory looking at, over time, 5 images over, I think, 15 years of a supernova that exploded in 1572. And you see this thing growing. And when I first saw it, I said, that looks like a virus coming at me from space. And I want you now, because then I remembered the IBM's picture. I want you folks to go look. You have to look at these pictures. You have to look at the IBM virus, then you have to look at the Chandra pictures, and that it's coming at us. They call it expanding. And I want you to tell me, with a clear mind, with no prejudice, whether or not is that an expanding nova, or did someone look out in space and we're seeing the Zika virus come at us, coming at us in space. Where did they get these pictures? What is going on? Anyway, I thought it fascinating. As soon as I saw Chandra picture, I said, that's Zika virus coming at us from space. What are we looking at? Is our whole world being looked at from a microscope, folks? Well, if they make it up, folks, I can make stuff up, can't I? I mean, you look out in the universe and you start really thinking, we're pretty puny in it all, aren't we? Just to bend your mind just a little bit, really fascinated. Is Chandra seeing a supernova, or is that the Zika virus coming at us? And how are we, folks, Independence Day, what's coming? What do we have to defend against? Is it an alien or a virus? Are we going to have enough vaccine? Maybe that's what they're vaccinating us against, is this monstrous supernova-sized Zika virus coming right at us. That's why it's getting bigger in the Chandra pictures. It's not expanding, it's coming at us. What is your perception, folks? How do you perceive the world? What do you use to perceive the world? What about the sensors that you use to perceive the world? Are they accurate? Are they fully informed? What are you going to do about it when you find out they might not be? What are you going to do about it when you find out you can correct it? Folks, are you going to be or are you going to do? Do you get in the game or do you not even just show up? If you do show up, do you get in the bleachers or do you go take a command position in the game just by showing up? Just by doing what your heart, your mind, your spirit says needs to be done to stop the crime against you. It really has come down to that. I wish it hadn't. I wish we could all just get together and laugh and joke and have barbecues or whatever, go help each other out, run around the country to visit each other. I wish we could. Enjoy each other's experience. That's not my experience. That isn't the experience I hear from a lot of other people. I wouldn't even be here if that was the reality, but it's not. What are we going to do to step up against that is really a decision each one of us makes and where. Thank you for tuning in today. Appreciate it. Thank you to Grimner and RLM, RealLibertyMedia.com, and the FN Network, social network, and Jules over at UCY.tv. Thank you very much. All the terrestrial broadcasters, I do appreciate what you're doing there to get the word beamed out. And all y'all, just contact other networks to carry the broadcast, even on a past cast or a rebroadcast. Take care. I'll be here, tech diffs and nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.